We're going to watch Senator Sanders' speech first.
The right to object.
It's a 6-minute speech where he wanted to talk about the importance of the 2K checks.
We should all be very, very clear. The working class of this country today faces more economic desperation than at any time since the Great Depression of the 1930s. And working families need help now. Not next year, but right now. Last night, the House of Representatives, with a 2/3 majority, 275 to 134, 2/3 bipartisan vote, moved to increase the direct payment going to working families from $600 per adult to $2,000 per adult. The House did the right thing. I congratulate them. And now it is time for the Senate to step up to the plate and do what the working families of this country overwhelmingly want us to do. Madam President, as a result of the pandemic, tens of millions of Americans have lost their jobs and their incomes. These families in the middle of the winter now face the threat of eviction and the possibility of being thrown out in the streets. Hunger in America is at the highest level that it has been for decades, with moms and dads struggling to feed their kids and working families lining up mile after mile to get emergency food packages. We are even seeing an increase in grocery store shoplifting as desperate Americans try to keep their families from going hungry. All of this taking place in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Madam President, over the last number of years, as I think everybody in America knows, Congress has provided massive tax breaks for the very wealthiest people in our country, which is one of the reasons why today we have more income and wealth inequality than any time since the 1920s. In fact, in the midst of this pandemic, this terrible pandemic, inequality has grown worse, with many in the billionaire class.
Part of the reason why I get so frustrated with idiotic people that make an argument about the necessity for policing, well, there is a necessity for some form of policing, but the necessity of the current American police force as it stands, and I mean Republicans who make this argument, constantly talk about how the crime rate is so much higher now. And what is deeply frustrating about this horrible argument is maybe crime is higher than before as a consequence of the material conditions that the average working class American is subjected to. I don't know. It kind of seems like the fucking pandemic and an increase in poverty is creating more desperate people, desperate to actually go out and do crimes. You know? Perhaps that's a factor. But what the fuck do I know? I mean, there's only studies even before peer-reviewed studies even fucking existed. There are thinkers in antiquity that have thought about how, or that have openly talked about how crime is connected to your socioeconomic conditions or your wealth. But hey, the fuck do I know? It's probably not the case.
Seeing their wealth increase by hundreds of billions of dollars while average Americans struggle to put food on the table. Congress has given huge tax breaks for large corporations so that some of the most profitable and largest corporations in America today pay zero in federal income taxes. We have just passed the largest military budget in the history of our country, $740 billion, more than the next 10 nations combined. And by the way, there was almost no debate about the size of that huge budget. Trump's veto dealt with other issues. Meanwhile, over 500,000 Americans are homeless.
Love you, Hasan.
Half of our working families are struggling to survive paycheck to paycheck. And in the midst of this terrible, unprecedented pandemic, over 90 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured in the midst of a pandemic, and they're not sure whether they can afford to go to a doctor. Madam President, we are coming to the close of one of the most terrible and painful years in American history. That is a tragic fact. Over 330,000 of our people have died from COVID-19, and as we speak, we are seeing record-breaking numbers of new cases and hospitals around the country being overwhelmed with new admissions. During the last year, the education and well-being of tens of millions of our young people, from childcare to graduate school, has been disrupted. And the terrible emotional isolation that this pandemic has caused, where people are unable to spend time with their family or their friends, has resulted in a huge increase in mental illness, drug addiction, and even suicide. Madam President, as I mentioned, the House has done the right thing. By an overwhelming vote, Democrats and Republicans voted to increase that $600 direct payment to $2,000. Recent poll came out. 78% of the American people think that was the right decision. They're hurting. They want help. The leaders of our country, President Trump, President-elect Biden, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, are all in agreement. We have got to raise that direct payment to $2,000. So that is where we are right now in this historic moment. Do we turn our backs on struggling working families, or do we respond to their pain? So, Madam President, would the senator modify his request that immediately following the vote on the veto override, the Senate proceed to the consideration of H.R. 9051, that the bill be considered read a third time and the Senate vote on passage of the bill without intervening action or debate. Further, that if passed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Bernie is, as you recall, one of the fighters that that advocated till the end and even threatened not to pass the CARES Act originally if the $600 unemployment insurance was not did not remain intact in the CARES Act. That was seen as controversial by some progressives who thought that the CARES Act was a massive wealth transfer to corporations that was going to greatly exacerbate income inequality in this country and the wealth disparity, make it even greater. And they are, I think, right. But I also believe that what Bernie did in that regard truly saved people's lives. Chuck Schumer's speech came before Bernie's. Let's take a